So, hi there, it's Dave Holland here from Results Rules OK, and joining me today is a friend and colleague of mine of some years, Sanjay Shar. So, Sanjay, welcome. Good to have you on the call. How are you?
Hi, Dave. I'm really good, thank you, and looking forward to this conversation.
And just for people who maybe don't know Sanjay, Sanjay is a recognized leader in the field of emotional intelligence. And I guess really, for the first question I'd like to ask is, why and how did you get started in the field of emotional intelligence?
Very interesting question, Dave, because nowadays, and over the last 10 years, when I've really focused in on emotional intelligence, most of the teaching out there is still on mind intelligence and what most people know as IQ. And that's my background. I was very analytical. I was brought up in a very educational background where IQ was everything, and yet it didn't help me in business. So in my business life, I started off just like everybody else, really eager to succeed. I had great plans, and yet that didn't quite pan out. Within a very short time, I'd lost a major relationship. My business went into liquidation, and I really struggled for the next 3 years. And that state where you've got something that is really powerful, that the world can benefit from, which is why we go into business. We've got something that we can give to the world, and in return, we get paid handsomely for doing that. Well, that didn't quite work out for me. And I got more and more frustrated. I got disappointed. I grew bitter. I went through a whole range of emotions, which culminated in a heart attack at the age of 42. So effectively lost relationship, lost business, and a heart attack by the age of 42. I knew I had to change something. And it was emotional intelligence which came to the rescue at that time, because in going through this experience, my heart broke. Really, all of that disappointment meant I had heartbreak, and that was what the heart attack was about. But it was cracked open, and I started to feel for the very first time in the way that we can all do so, which is very safe. And by feeling, I'm not talking about expressing. I'm not talking about, most people associate anger with people sort of ranting and raving. That's expressing. What I'm talking about is something very different, and that's the emotional intelligence that I now teach to people. So really, it was from my pain that I came across emotional intelligence, and it came to be the answer to the reason why I wasn't succeeding, and then since then I've found out why a lot of other people aren't succeeding.
Okay, so you used the term earlier on when we were talking before we sat in the booth, and I love the term emotioneering, which is something that sort of describes what you do in terms of your current work. What were the 2 or 3 key turning points or learning points for you that moved you on through this journey?
I guess these incidences which I described were major turning points in my life. But in terms of emotioneering is the deliberate act of using emotions to create the results that you want in life. Now, we all have a mind and we all have a body, which means we all think and we all feel. Some of us like to pretend that we don't do emotions, but we do. And the only time we're going to get a flat line is when we're long gone on that. So emotions exist, whether we want to feel them or not, we feel them. And I realized through some great teachers that I met along the way that there was a very safe way of using the emotions. And what emotioneering is an addition to the mind intelligence, to the IQ. So I'm not talking about replacing the mind. I'm talking about using the emotions to supplement the mind. They are both very two different intelligence systems that we have access to. Unfortunately, we've been taught how to use one and not the other. So in terms of key points, for me personally, it was the realization that I could actually feel anger and don't have to show it to other people. What I used to do was suppress it. I not show it to people, but in suppressing it, I was stuffing it inside my body, and that wasn't doing the body any good. What most people think of is expressing when they talk about feelings. Expressing is kind of showing it and throwing it out to the world. So nowadays we have all these terms about road rage and air rage and all sorts of other rages, and that's expressing. feeling is something which is altogether different. It's actually feeling that energy, and emotions are just energy. When you go into quantum physics, they can prove that every emotion we feel creates a molecule within the body. And if it's a molecule, if it's a physical substance, quantum physics has also shown that at the heart of that substance, it's mostly just empty space. And so all of these, really in-depth emotions that we feel, it could be anger, it could be sadness, it could be disappointment. I joke about them. Ultimately, they're just full of hot air. And it's realizing that, yeah.
So, in terms of the insights that you've gained, how would you summarize them in terms of, you've clearly been on a journey of a point in life where this became very real for you to change and divert. But how did you start? These insights, very, very powerful. How did you start? Where did you go? How did you learn the new skills?
At a very low point in my life, I came across a book called Unlimited Power by Anthony Robbins, and many of the listeners have probably heard of him.
Sure.
And I got persuaded by a very successful businessman to spend £500, which was a lot of money at that time for me, being out of work and broke, to invest in myself. But he made me a guarantee which I couldn't refuse. He said, look, go to this course. If you don't benefit, I'll give you twice the amount of money back. And I thought, you're serious about this? So I took him up on it, and I scraped together the money, and I went to that course. And that was my first real exposure to self-development.
Right.
But the emotional intelligence didn't kick in until a bit further along the way. But initially, what I learned through Anthony Robbins was that there is a different way of thinking and a different way of acting which can create results for us in our life. And from there, I decided to take it much further, because very quickly I started to notice results. One of the things that disturbed me was, whilst I was getting the results, they weren't necessarily lasting. And that kind of got me thinking, okay, so now I'm getting results which I was never able to get, but unlike these really successful people, my results aren't lasting. Why is that? And I went into seeking even further, because for the first time in my life, I had self-belief. And in doing that, I came across some other teachers which were very different to most of the well-known teachers. Now, these are people who aren't necessarily well-known across the world, but they're well-known in their field. And what I realized with each one of them was primarily they were talking about emotions. And through learning through these different teachers, I started to make connections between the different types of teaching which other people perhaps haven't made, because they hadn't gone through to such a diverse group of people. And from that point, I started to put different things together. And I guess the greatest insight was, it's actually safe to feel.
Right.
It's safe to feel anger, it's safe to feel disappointment. And once we're done with the feeling, we can get on with life.
It hasn't got to affect your day.
That's it. But, how many times for example, we both drove in this morning, we were talking about the traffic and how bad it was. And I know, driving around in traffic, I used to get really furious because people would cut me up and people would silly things on the roads, and then that would affect me for the rest of the day.
Sure.
Whereas now, it just takes a few seconds, I'm over it, I can get on with the rest of the day without some idiot affecting how my results occur in the rest of the day.
So you found a range of teachers from Tony Robbins and other people, and you combined this together to build your own style, product, method of delivering emotional intelligence. Can you give us some examples to demonstrate sort of the value of your insights, perhaps, of how it's affected you, but how it's affected other people as well in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give two examples. One is a business example, and I had a client fairly recently. He was already very successful in business, and a lot of the people I coach are people who are already successful. And people might ask, well, why is it that they would come to me for coaching if they're already successful? In becoming successful, they started to pay a price in different areas of my life. Now, I kind of paid the price before I was successful, but most successful people, if they're really focused on what they do, get their life out of balance. And for him, that success led to a lot of stress, and it was affecting his relationships. And so I worked with him, showing him how to work at the emotional level with what was going on for him. And he managed to sort out his relationships, and lo and behold, his business became even more successful because he was a happier person. He was turning up at work without carrying all the baggage from home into the workplace, and he became a nicer person to work with. He became a leader and an influencer up till then because he was kind of exploding at work with his emotions. A lot of people who liked the business didn't particularly like him, and he became somebody that people liked again. And when you like somebody that you work with, you tend to go out of your way to do better for them, which meant, obviously that the business itself benefited from that as well. And that's just one example. In this case, it was relationships that was affecting him.
So when you're working with these successful people, then you're absolutely right. I think success comes in different currencies for different people, but there's always a trade-off at some point. Is it a case of people having to let go of some of the anchors they had in the past that they thought made them successful and realize that was only part of? And how do you address that? How do you get to the point where somebody can actually say it's okay to change and be different in order to move forwards? Is that a challenge for most people?
I think one of the biggest fears people have when they come to me, if they're already successful, is in order to get the balance in life, they're going to have to give up something. And that's a complete fallacy. You don't actually need to give up your success. You don't need to give up your wealth. You don't need to give up anything in order to get balance. What you do need to do is have a different perspective. And so people are pleasantly surprised when they work with me that actually they can hold on to all the things that are beneficial to them. And anything that they truly want to let go of is a choice. As well. And once they start to work at the emotional level, they can also identify what is actually helping them and taking them forward and what is holding them back. And if it's holding them back, they can make a logical decision from the mind as to whether or not it's something that they truly want to hold on to or it's something that they need to let go of.
So how would somebody, when you give them these techniques and tools and you coach them and train them, they stay with you for a period of time, how do you get them to lock in these techniques so they can use them in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time?
One thing which people need to understand up front is the mind and IQ is linear, it's logical. Emotions are non-linear, non-logical. So emotions come and there's no logic behind what comes emotionally. Now, because of that, because the mind is linear, you can think about it, you can rationalize. And you can learn from a book. Emotions happen in the body. They're not in the mind, they're in the body. And things that happen in the body have to be experienced. So the way of learning something emotionally and then locking it in is to have an experience. So I work with people and I take them through a range of different experiences which will lock in the learnings. And so effectively, when they come to use them, they don't need to think about them because it's locked in.
Okay, it becomes like almost a habit, an experienced habit.
Yeah, it's an automatic reaction, something which, if you think about it, you don't need to think about, shall I have another heartbeat? Shall I digest my food? It all kind of happens automatically in the background.
Okay.
And emotional responses can be like that as well.
So does your work apply to all people? Is it business people only, or is it a particular type of person? Is it men only or women only, or is it general? Is it something that applies to all of us, or is it something you found that only applies to some?
Fundamentally, it applies to all of us. My speciality and my skill is in working with business people. That's what I've done for the last 10 years, and I really honed in on that because I seem to have a talent for helping that particular category of people. Now, to be honest, for the first 8 years or so of my business, probably 90% plus of my clients were women. They were far more open to emotional intelligence. Men have this connotation that the moment you start talking about emotions, you got to lie back on a couch and have tears and tissues, and basically therapy, and it's nothing like that at all. Then emotional intelligence started to get out into the market. Daniel Goleman wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence, and that's pretty much become the Bible
Sure.
in emotional intelligence. Where I differ from Daniel is Daniel's written a book, and it's a great book. It gives you the theory. But as I said earlier, the way to get emotional intelligence is to experience it, and you can't get an experience from a book.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could give people an experience from a book because it would be very easy to teach what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, it's about experiencing. And so I work with both men and women now, and it's pretty much 50-50 now.
Okay.
So the men have kind of caught up with the game and realised that it's something, whether they like it or not, they need to do.
Right.
And as they do take up emotional intelligence, they make far better decisions, and they become people who are influential rather than people who are looked down upon because they're trying to manipulate people.
Interesting you pick on that point. I know we spoke earlier on about the difference between influence in a positive, supportive role and then manipulation. Could you just go into a bit more detail about that? You've seen both sides, I guess. And what's the key, the different techniques? How is somebody influencing positively as opposed to manipulation? How does that manifest itself?
Fundamentally, it's due to what emotions we are feeling in the body.
Mm-hmm.
There are, just like positive and negative thinking, there are positive and negative emotions. The negative emotions are emotions which hold you back, which actually sap up your body's energy. Emotions do use up the body's energy. They're in the body, and certain emotions use up more energy than they actually give you. So the net effect is you have less energy in the body.
Okay.
Positive emotions actually give you more energy than is needed, so you end up with more energy in the body. And when you're coming from low-level emotions, like, for example, like apathy, fear, desire, and by desire I'm not talking about the wanting of a goal, I'm talking about an unhealthy wanting, anger, or pride. And some people are surprised that pride is a negative emotion, and yet when you do the research on it, you realize that it actually holds you back. With these emotions, we're coming from a place of lack. We're coming from a place of being afraid. We're coming from a place of thinking that there isn't abundance out there, so we've got to grab our slice of it and hold on to it. When we do that, we start to manipulate people. And it's not intentional, but that's what we end up doing because we're trying to protect a slice of the pie.
Sure.
When we come from a place of the higher emotions, from emotions of courage, from confidence, from knowing that things are going to work out, from accepting a situation for what it is, so that once we've accepted it, we can just go and do what we need to do. Whereas most people fight the situation. And from a place of absolute knowing that you have the skills that you need to succeed in business, from that place, we're not fearful, and we can start to treat people in a very different way. Instead of manipulating them, we encourage them, we invite them to bring out the best in themselves. And people treated that way look up to people. And so influence to me is where people look up to you. Manipulation is where you sort of look down on people on there. Now, you can say, well, if you're looking down on people, people are looking up to you, but it's a very different sensation, and I'm sure the listeners know when they're being manipulated. And when somebody is standing in front of them who is inspiring, who is influential, it's a very different feeling. And so the emotions themselves will tell us what's happening.
Sure. Thank you. From the ground we've covered, and we've gone into quite a bit of detail of some of your background and ideas, if there was just one thing, apart from what you've already shared, that you'd want the listeners to take away or know, what would it be?
I think one of the things for me which was the greatest benefit was knowing the difference between suppressing emotions, expressing emotions, and feeling emotions. So there are three different things we can do with emotions. As a nation in the United Kingdom, we are taught to suppress. We have that stiff upper lip, and I'm no different. I grew up in the UK, and I grew up with that stiff upper lip. And whatever I did, don't show emotions in public. That's that's what I was taught, and I didn't. And what I did was I kind of bottled them up, and it's like a pressure cooker which is building up. All these emotions are trapped inside, trying to get out. And that pressure cooker eventually blows up, which is where the rages come in.
Okay.
And the other side, which is healthier for you, is expressing. So it's better to get the emotions out. but it's not always healthy on the person or the thing that you expressed on. And I was a great suppressor. I became an expert at suppressing, and people actually used to say to me, Sanjay, you would be great at poker because we haven't got a clue what's going on. And I used to take that as a compliment, and I realized actually it wasn't working for me. It wasn't helping me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, suppressing is stuffing them down. Expressing is throwing them out.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody or something gets hurt in the process. Feeling emotions is something that very few of us actually understand, and it's actually just having that emotion pass through the body.
Mm-hmm.
We have thoughts come into our head and then thoughts go. Emotions come into our body, and as long as we let them go again, they're completely harmless, but they give us energy.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to take an action, most people know that it's not enough just to think positively, you've got to take an action.
Sure.
But the emotion which you are feeling at the time affects the quality of the action.
Okay.
So if you're in a place of apathy, and apathy is that sense of what's the point, it's not going to work out anyway, so why bother?
Mm-hmm.
And you take an action, the very same action taken from a place of absolute confidence in yourself will produce a completely different result, even though the action itself is the same.
Okay.
So the emotions, the energy of the emotions has a dramatic impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'm saying to people is, find out what it's like to feel, because it's not what you think. Remember, you can't think about emotions. You can't make logic out of them. It's an experience.
Sure.
And once you get to have that experience, you realize that here is an intelligence system that has been waiting for you to use, which can dramatically impact the results that you can attain in life.
Fabulous. So, and having gone through, I'm sure people listening to this conversation are intrigued now about what you do. If anybody, or when anybody wants to find out more about you or the work that you do, how can they find you or contact you and get in touch?
I'm on all the usual social media pages. So if they look for Sanjay Shar, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, and I'm also on LinkedIn. But the easiest way, I guess, is to go to my website, and it's Sanjay Shar, SANJAY, SHAH.TV, and that's as in television. And I've created a special page for all of your listeners, actually, and there's a few extra things that they can access which isn't available to other people. So if they go to sanjayshar.tv/results rules OK, then they'll find a nice surprise there, which is a thank you for actually checking me out.
Fabulous. So, Sanjay, we are coming up to time. Thank you for your time and your input, and it's a pleasure. We could talk all day, we know this. And for those people listening in, thank you for your time as well. Obviously, go to Sanjay's page. There's a link to Sanjay's page on our website as well at resultsrulesok.com. And please make contact, say hi, and I look forward to speaking with you again. Thanks for listening, and speak to you real soon. Thanks for now.
Thank you, David.